everyone. My name is Paul Fries. I'm delighted to chair the Coordinating Committee on Veterans Benefits and Services. We are experts from, the group is comprised of experts around the country who have taken to heart the ABA's call to get pro bonos more actively involved in serving veterans, especially combat veterans coming back from the wars who are afflicted with invisible wounds of PTSD and traumatic brain injury. We have a really good lineup today. I'm so excited to introduce our guests. Before doing so, I wanted to introduce the commission who sponsored this program and done all the hard work of organizing it. And Antonia, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Antonia is our chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Antonia Passanelli, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. Just a few words about the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty. We're a 13-member commission with a number of other liaisons from sections, but our charge is to advance programs and policies that both serve people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, as well as lead to solutions to homelessness. One of our major programs is the Veterans Justice Initiative, which encompasses all of our work with veterans treatment courts, homeless court programs that serve veterans, our efforts to help local legal services programs and local bar associations create pro bono programs to serve homeless veterans and veterans at risk of homelessness, and the list goes on and on. So we're delighted to be here today and to help sponsor this program, and looking forward to hearing from some of the local programs and courts.
I've been associated with this commission probably for 7 or 8 years. I worked at a public interest law firm called Public Counsel since 1994. Our main mission is to try and look at where the most unmet needs of vulnerable populations are, where they can't afford representation, and mobilize pro bono responses to address their needs. And ever since I've got involved in this commission, it's by far the most dynamic working group I've had the privilege of working with, and have introduced us to amazing people in the community to help join force to make a difference where the need is most profound. With respect to one of the things we try to do is strategically identify vulnerable sectors of the population and demographics at highest risk of poor outcomes. And when you consider that we know that the Vietnam-era veterans currently, there are about 233,000 of those, mostly men, who are in our jails and prisons as we speak. You realize what's at stake with respect to the next wave of combat veterans coming back from the wars. A few things we're highlighting. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Welcome.
Help yourself to food too. We're just getting started. We're just doing introductions. And matter of fact, I am so remiss. We need to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves before I tell my little spiel here. So, Renato, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Renato Isageta, and I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Side of Orange County, California, and also serve as a judge pro tem for our collaborative court, which also houses our combat court as well. And I'm also a commission member for Homeless and Poverty.
My name is Jeff Conway, and I'm an attorney in Kansas City, and I'm working on a project right now through Army One Source, and what we're trying to do is encourage more pro bono activity on the part of attorneys through the state bars. So it's kind of a complementary effort with the ABA's effort. And we have a recruitment program that we're doing, and we're going to push that out to more states. And so I'm very excited about that program.
Jeff will be presenting a little bit later.
My name is Sarah Summerstrom. I work for the Minnesota Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans. I used to work for the Minnesota Justice Foundation. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, we run a statewide program for homeless and at-risk veterans. I am a liaison to the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, and run a series of legal clinics and pro bono referrals for homeless and at-risk veterans.
Hi, I'm Ty Glenn, the Executive Director at Veteran Pandemic Law Center.
Sorry.
It's contagious. At least I didn't say Legal Aid Foundation where I work. In Los Angeles, and we are a non-profit family law services provider. We do free and low-cost family law, and one of the things we do that nobody else does, a few things, we try to fill in the gaps that legal services providers don't do. One of the things we do is we provide family law representation to homeless veterans at a small project for several years. And when I came on board as the executive director a year ago, one of my big goals was to grow our veterans project. And I'm very excited to say that we got a law firm of Mayor Brown to sign on to do pro bono representation at child support hearings for vets in Los Angeles as a test. And then if it goes well, we're going to grow it with them, hopefully maybe to other cities. And also I've been talking to the Association of Pro Bono Counsel, David Lash, who said come back to him, and if it works we should talk about building out to other firms. I'm really excited about the idea that this might be the perfect pro bono piece. It's really hard to get pro bonos to do family law, as you know, but this seems like the bite-sized piece that might work, so I'm really excited about it. And we're just busy trying to grow the program to a full-time attorney and a full-time pro bono program. So I'm happy to hear all your ideas.
And child support arrears, as you know, is a huge issue affecting returning combat veterans.
And it's an employment issue also, because in California, I don't know about your states, they suspend your driver's license for not paying your child support, and without the driver's license you can't get a job, and basically you can't quit being homeless and work and pay the money to the family that needs it unless you straighten that out.
Jason, do you mind introduce yourself and then we'll get back to you?
Oh, sorry. Hi, Jason Bale, counsel to the ABA Standing Committee on Legal Assistance for Military Personnel, and our chair, General Earhart, is going to be here.
And Jason's spearheading an effort to get congressional kind of know your rights cards for veterans through congressional offices so they can look at it and have like an access point to know what services they're eligible for very seamlessly. Okay, Jeff?
I'm Jeff Youngman. I'm with the Crisis Ministries Homeless Justice Project in Charleston, South Carolina. We provide legal services to people that are homeless in the Charleston area. As of December, I guess 54% of my clients were veterans. I'm also a member of the commission.
And also provides services stand-down improvements to those services.
Hi, I'm Kathy Finch. This is Letitia Gayton. We both work at the Dallas VA Hospital, and we are Veterans Justice Outreach Specialists.
Wonderful.
Hey,
Thank you
wonderful.
for joining us.
My name is Courtney Young. I'm the program manager for the Tarrant County Veterans Court Diversion Program.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
My name is Christina Plum, and I'm a member of the Standing Committee on Public Education. And I'm here because we've recently created a committee to look at what we can continue to do to help veterans. We currently work, our staffer works with Jason on the Homefront website that the ABA has, but we're looking to either create or promote other projects that are going around the country.
Fantastic.
Hi, my name is Amy Horton-Knoll, and I'm the staff attorney for the Coordinating Committee on Veterans Benefits and Services at the ABA, and I also direct the ABA's Commission on Homelessness and Poverty.
She's also my probation officer, FYI.
Robert Bond. I'm not actually an attorney at all, but I am interested in learning more about this.
Sabrina Allen. I just moved from Houston, where I was working with the Houston Volunteer Lawyer Program, where they have the Veterans Hospital there, and I'm looking to get involved here in the Dallas area.
I'm Dave Earhart. Sorry I'm late. I'm the chair of the ABA Standing Committee on Legal Assistance for Military Personnel.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Brock Hunter. I'm an Army veteran and an attorney in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My practice is primarily criminal defense, working with veterans in the criminal court system. In addition to the work in the courtroom, I've been involved in public policy advocacy in Minnesota and nationally on veterans criminal justice issues. And for the past couple of years, I've been working with a group of people to publish a book, primarily for attorneys, but also for anyone really working with veterans in the criminal court system. And I'll be doing a little presentation on the book here later in the meeting today.
Okay, looks like I'm up next. I'm just walking through the door. My name is Richard Chang. I'm the General Counsel for Senior Care Centers. We operate 38 different nursing homes throughout the state of Texas. Obviously, with the title of Senior Care Centers, you have a lot of seniors and a lot of veterans. So just here to gain some additional insight on the topic.
I'm Linda Bernay, and I'm a retired Air Force officer and disabled vet. And I do a lot of work with issues related to women veterans, access to care, veterans treatment, courts, and other issues. I pepper Paul's inbox on a regular basis with new stuff.
She says she's a disabled vet, but she's one of the most empowering people I've ever met.
So, and I'm now in Columbus, Ohio. Last time I was here, I was working at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague. I ended that after 5 years, and I'm now working at the Columbus Municipal Court in Columbus, Ohio, the largest and busiest court in the state of Ohio.
I'm Joan Gillum, and I live here in Dallas, and I'm an attorney, and I specialize in veterans disability benefit cases. And I have pro bono client. I work with a lot of the pro bono agencies all across the United States. And then I'm licensed in the Virgin Islands and Washington, D.C. And I found out yesterday that now I was appointed to be on a committee with the indigent defense issue that we have in the Virgin Islands, because there's a lot of issues with appointments of counsel. And so I found out yesterday that they had asked me to be on that. So now it kind of ties into some of this, and one of the things that we're talking about is treatment courts and that type of thing.
Do you also deal with discharge upgrades at all?
Yes, I do. I deal with discharge upgrades, and I also deal with, I specialize in the Iraq, Afghanistan, Gulf War era veterans. And I also specialize in the issue with their disability separations, because there has been laws that have been changed, and they received severance pay, but there is a certain way that they can possibly go back to a board and get military retirement. So, and I have clients, like I said, all over the United States.
Steve?
I'm Steve Binder. I'm a deputy public defender in San Diego and special advisor to the ABA Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, representing, focusing almost exclusively homeless court and veterans court. We'll get into it later. But January 1st, there was a new 1170.9H. There we go. Which provides restorative relief for participants who successfully completed their veterans court. Their case is dismissed and file is sealed. More details later. 3 days later, we had the first 2 participants who received such relief. The dark side is there's a little pushback. We'll discuss that later.
Steve is instrumental in helping LA County start our own homeless court, which eventually evolved into a veterans court as well. And if any of you are interested in starting one and you haven't already involved, explored the homeless court or veterans court, he's an incredible resource.
Wonderful. I'm Antonia Fasinelli. Some of you heard me introduce the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty before that, but about me, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm the director of a program called the Homeless Persons Representation Project. We provide free legal services to people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And in 2008, we started providing representation to homeless veterans in areas of service-connected disability benefits. Some of you may know Baltimore has the worst and slowest claims processing center in the country, among other dubious distinctions for Baltimore. But we also help with discharge upgrades, and soon we'll open an on-site legal clinic at the VA Medical Center this month. So,
I'm Katie McGovern. I'm a staff attorney at Pine Tree Legal Assistance in Portland, Maine. And Pine Tree is the statewide legal services program in Maine. And we have an SFDF grant and are doing increasing amounts of work with veterans and on our website, Stateside Legal. And I'm a new member of the Commission on Justice and Poverty.
My name is Terry Tottenham. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I've been involved with Texas Lawyers for Texas Veterans.
We'll be hearing from Terry shortly.
And I'm Joanne Mirica, also from Austin, Texas. I'm a private practitioner, but I chair Texas Lawyers for Texas Veterans, which was an initiative of Terry's when he was state bar president, and we are currently overseeing about 14 different regular monthly, weekly, bi-monthly clinics around the state of Texas. I also co-chair the Austin version of that.
I'm Roger Jacobson. I'm an attorney with Legal Aid of Northwest Texas here in Dallas. We're the legal services organization for Dallas. Joan, it's nice to meet you. We emailed. I would do mostly family law, and we have a grant from the Texas Veterans Commission that prioritizes veterans in our program, so I've been getting a lot of custody cases, divorces, child support, those types of things. And also I've seen the other side have represented spouses of veterans who have been victims of returning veterans problems because of it. But I do mostly family law.
And again, I'm Paul Fries, Chair of the Coordinating Committee on Veterans Benefits and Services, and also Special Advisor on Veterans Advocacy to the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, which Antonia chairs for those of you who know me. I also am a veteran. I do not serve in combat, but I know the culture of being a veteran and the challenges it presents when you're transitioning back to civilian life. While I was in EIT with training to become a military policeman, I came down with walking pneumonia and tried to, the culture is such you don't want to go to sick bay, and so I tried to sleep it off on the weekend. Woke up Monday morning, could barely walk, and I mentioned to a Marine buddy of mine, I said, I got to go to sick bay. He did kind of scoff, you wuss, The doctor said if I hadn't come in, I would have died in 3 days. So that's the kind of culture for physical ailments. You can imagine how much more so for post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, the invisible wounds of combat, which are as real and often even more devastating than physical wounds, and that we saw, led to our veterans coming from the Vietnam era war precipitously pushed them towards homelessness and long-term involvement in incarceration. I was just mentioning a statistic before we went to introductions that we currently estimate about 233,000 veterans from the Vietnam era are in our jails and prisons as we speak. I want you to think about that. These are mostly men.
What was that number again?
233,000. And they're not counted among the homeless population. But what's going to happen when they're discharged if they ever do leave jail or prison? The cycle is very predictable. They've taught us that cycle, that you come out with depression, with severe instability mentally. You can't cope with society. You can't cope in the workforce. You can't cope at home, so you self-medicate. And then your problems begin to are exacerbated to the point that you begin to act antisocially, attracting a law enforcement response. Now you're incarcerated. Now when you get out of jail, you have a criminal record, and the employer finds out about it, you can't get work, and you're set up for long-term failure, depression, and an ongoing cycle where you end up long-term institutionalized or long-term homeless. One study estimates that there are more homeless people in the United States who are Vietnam-era veterans than died in the conflict. And then this statistic about those who are in prison. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to prevent with respect to the next wave. And consider a few factors that really set forth how stark the stakes are. At the Vietnam-era veterans, you served one deployment, you came home, and you never had to worry about going back. With this generation, we're seeing 3, 4, multiple deployments. There was even an incident with a Minnesota veteran who had served 12 and then exploded. Those wounds are incredibly profound. You'll hear more from Brock about that and how it plays out and what we can do if you're involved in the criminal defense system. From my perspective, that's the dark side of the challenge we face. The bright side has been to meet incredibly dynamic attorneys across the country who've decided they're going to do everything they can to help make a difference and prevent those dire outcomes from afflicting the next group of returning combat veterans. And the great joy of my work is meeting those outstanding attorneys, and I was just absolutely blown away when I discovered the model they're doing here in Texas. We in California don't like to think that we're worse than Texas, but I got to tell you, we can't cast a shadow of that. It's really remarkable what they've done in mobilizing a pro bono response and developing a website that makes it easy, one, if you're a veteran, to access free legal services, and two, if you want to volunteer, to have an efficient mechanism in order to help you to be of service to veterans. So without further ado, I'm going to be talking more as we go through the program about various facets of models of immersion. Veteran treatment court in particular is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and we'll be addressing that later. But right now I want to hear from our Texas folks who really truly magnificent work they're doing.
I'll just stand so I can see folks at the end of the table. My name is Terry Tottenham, as I say, and I want to kind of give you an overview of how we got this thing started in Texas, and then turn it over to Joanne America, who is the real workforce behind what we're doing in Texas here. The Houston Bar Association initiated a program to assist veterans with their legal needs. And it became just clear as a bell to me that with our veteran-centric population in Texas, we have a huge base in El Paso, Fort Bliss. We have a huge base, Fort Hood, in Central Texas. And we had a huge veteran-centric population in Texas. San Antonio is a huge veterans population. So we basically copied what happened in Houston and took it statewide. Now, there were a number of challenges we faced initially. The first challenge was with the VA. Because the VA's first reaction was, oh my God, we're bringing lawyers into the VA, what is that all about? So we had to convince the VA medical clinics that we were not there to litigate, we were there to assist veterans with their many legal needs. We were very fortunate because the director of the VA Medical Center in Houston had a very positive experience of working with the Houston Bar. So he became kind of our liaison with all the other medical clinics facilities in Texas. So we got him to lead the discussions on our conference calls, and he convinced his colleagues it's going to be okay, it's going to be good for the veterans, they're not going to be suing you every day, so let the lawyers in. So we overcame that hurdle. The second hurdle we had was with the Texas Veterans Commission. The Texas Veterans Commission is a state agency in Texas that advocates for veterans. Fantastic organization. They've got a lot of really dedicated counselors to assist veterans. But their initial reaction was, we're going to have lawyers come in here and take over our jobs. We don't want them to do that. We sat down with the TVC and explained to them, again, we're all working in the same arena. We're all pulling the same direction. They got on board. That then opened up all of veteran service organizations, the American Legion, the VFW. Once we overcame those initial sort of knee-jerk reactions from lawyers coming in to assist people, then we were off and running. The way we set up our organization in Texas was through our local bar associations, whether it's Dallas or Austin or San Antonio or some of our rural bar areas. These local bars really got enthusiastic about this project because, number one, there's a real need, but number two, it opened the pro bono world. We had a lot of lawyers who had never done pro bono work, but when it came time to helping a veteran or a veteran's family, they were on board 110%. So we had a sort of a network already laid out in Texas to push our program out into the local bars. We also struck an alliance with the mental health, mental retardation community centers, which are psychologists, social workers, mental health professionals. And we're building more of a network now so that we will have referrals from the legal clinics out to our mental health professionals, because obviously the mental health issue is such an important component of all this. So that kind of is an overview of how we got this started. And we were very fortunate in Texas because we have a terrific staff at our state bar. They put together this clinic in a box, which Joanne will talk about. And as importantly, we had great lawyers like Joanne America, who I want to introduce you to, who was very active in this program at the very beginning. She was, as you mentioned, she's co-chair of the effort in Austin, now chairs the effort statewide. And the thing I love about Joanne is that she rolls up her sleeves and goes into the clinic and does the work, and she's very passionate about it. But before I turn it over to Joanne, I just want to say how much I appreciate all of you around the table with your passion on this issue. I think there are a lot of great needs that we serve as lawyers. But I think the needs of our veterans and what these young men and women are facing and going to face coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan is enormous. The percentage of veterans who claim VA benefits usually ran about 29%. It's now over 50%, and it's going to increase. We have just begun to see the effect of this Iraq and Afghanistan war on our veterans. The tail that we're going to face is Vietnam paled in comparison to what we're going to be facing going forward. So I think it's going to take a lot of folks like us who have the passion to really focus on this and get people involved. But the more we make people aware of the problem, the more people will get involved. Let me mention one other secondary benefit of this kind of focus, and that is the impact this program has on the image of lawyers in the non-lawyer community. when I go around and talk to business groups, non-lawyer groups, Rotary clubs, people like that, about this program, invariably, the response is, you know, I've told lawyer jokes my whole career, but I think I'm going to put a hold on it for a while, realizing what you do. So that's not why we're doing it, but it's a secondary gain, I think, that we got. I really appreciate Paul and your colleagues here for your focus on this. Let me turn it over to my good buddy Joanne Merrick, who can really tell you what it's like when the rubber meets the road.
Thank you, Terry.
By the way, Terry was the former president of the Texas State Bar. And he was the driving force behind this initiative.
Yeah. In 2010, Terry began and decided that he loved the Houston project and the number of veterans that it has served, which to date is about 6,000 just in Houston. We implemented this project in 2010, took it statewide. We have 14 local bar associations that are conducting regular clinics. We have many others that have done like one per year, say around Veterans Day, or you know, in connection with a stand down or an event like that if they have it. But we have 14 that operate like almost at least monthly. Some of them operate weekly. And we're very, very proud of that. We have got 2,400 volunteer lawyers in the state who have raised their hand and said, I'll come to clinics, I'll give advice, I'll take cases. And we have served since 2010, when Terry took this statewide, 6,400 veterans. So I think everybody in this room definitely agrees that, you know, especially when we have recently returning veterans coming back, that how well they integrate back will determine whether they are productive citizens or they end up being homeless and have addiction and other issues. A lot of the time, one of those key forks in the road involves a legal issue. And if you can get a discharge upgrade and you can qualify somebody for benefits, it's life-changing. So it's imperative that we have lawyers that do this. The clinics operate on two different models. They are all, you know, run essentially by local bar associations, and there are certain geographic and community characteristics that have to be taken into account. In some areas we have VA hospitals. We've got one in Dallas, we've got one in Houston. We don't have one in Austin. We've got an outpatient clinic. And so one of the things that we found is that most of the time it works well to try and hold clinics at that kind of a location. Now, there have been some deviations from that. Occasionally we use American Legion, VFW posts, if you're in a smaller town and there's not even a clinic. We've also, in Austin, we conducted around Veterans Day, I think in 2010, a clinic at a local church that is right next to the homeless shelter. Because those guys, when Terry and I went there sort of doing an initial interview of what sorts of legal problems do you have and do we need to address and what are some of the other issues, they said, you know, look, for us to get out to the outpatient clinic, which is in south, way east Austin, it's a long bus ride, it's an impossible walk, you know. It would not be convenient for us, for you guys to be there. And so we weren't. We changed the venue and we went there and we advertised it through the shelter. And we had a connection with a social worker for VA who is at the Austin Resource Center for the Homeless and the Salvation Army. And she knows that, you know, there are people that she can call in Austin to refer folks. What we did when we decided to take the project statewide is the State Bar created a clinic in a box, which is based on the materials that Houston has. And so every local bar association could show up and they could pick one of these up or we would mail it to them. But basically the contents are everything from things like, you know, notepads and hand sanitizer and whiteout and paper clips and tape and, you know, binder clips. There is a clinic in a box, how to get started PowerPoint presentation. There is signage for you to put up in whatever building you are, saying, you know, legal services this way. There is a volunteer sign-in sheet for the lawyers. There is an applicant sign-in sheet for the veterans so that they can say, you know, who they are and what they think their legal problem is. Caveat, sometimes what they think their legal problem is not what the lawyers think their legal problem is. A legal advice handbook is in here. Texas also made these nifty little lapel pins, which we love, and we always try to put some of those in the box so that the volunteers can have them, and many of them wear them proudly. We also have the income guidelines. The reason for that is the clinics run on 2 models. Some of them you must qualify, well, below certain poverty guidelines to be eligible for services. The Houston has sort of a hybrid model because their funding comes from a source that's not quite as strict as the usual legal aid source. The Austin model is not income bound at all. So in Austin, our model is if you're a veteran and you come in, you will get free advice. And if you have a problem that requires additional work, we will check and see if you're income qualified. If you are, then we'll fill out that paperwork and send you to the appropriate agency. If you're not, volunteer legal services or the lawyer referral service or a private lawyer. And sometimes the lawyers at the clinics just take cases. We have had, as Terry said, we've had volunteers be wonderfully receptive to the needs of veterans and have been very, very willing to help them out. We also have a list of statewide resources that are available in Texas, civil resources according to the county that you're in, some criminal resources. We have attorney note sheets so that you can fill out information about who you've talked to, what the problem is, how you disposed of the case, and then we log and keep track of what dispositions were made. Is the problem handled? Does this person still need to see anybody? If they need additional assistance, what did you do with it? Did you take the case yourself? Did you send them on to legal aid or VLS, lawyer referral service? What happened? We have the applications for those folks that we think are income qualified, and the lawyers who are at the clinics that don't pre-screen applicants can at least, if we know somebody needs additional services, ask them, what is your approximate monthly income? And know in advance, rather than having everybody sit there and fill out all this paperwork to go, oh, well, you're not qualified. So just try to be more efficient about that. We have certain questionnaires. If you have a divorce matter and somebody's going to take the case, we've got a divorce questionnaire, we've got custody questionnaires, probate questionnaires, guardianship questionnaires, landlord-tenant, identity theft, consumer and bankruptcy, and estate planning questionnaires that all come in the clinic in a box. We also have the VA attorney accreditation and benefits claim information file. We've really tried to encourage more Texas lawyers to get the VA accreditation. It was a fairly new thing in 2010. I think the VA was just still figuring out what the rules were going to be about how to do it. And we started off on the wrong foot and called a bunch of folks together and had this great training by the Texas Veterans Commission, and then found out that the way VA was doing it, you had to apply for the accreditation first and then get the CLE. So the State Bar has done 2 3-hour CLE webcasts that are available for Texas lawyers to get online. They satisfy the VA accreditation requirements, and they're available free. And we have had more lawyers who are willing to train up and try and take veterans benefit cases as a result of that. Finally, I had a pen here, maybe I jumped. The Texas Young Lawyers Association did some pamphlets for us. Okay, they are just missing. One is resources for veterans seeking help, and the other is resources for lawyers assisting veterans. Great little pamphlets. Take samples, copy them, make them specific to your state where it's needed. And then we went to the local bar leaders conference with bazillions of these clinics in a box, and we had some great marketing materials that were put together by the State Bar of Texas. One is a piece to Toby Keith's An American Soldier, which just makes everybody cry and makes lawyers go, oh, and we've just, used that quite a bit, and it's been great. We've also had a very effective PowerPoint presentation to talk about the number of veterans that we have coming back, what their needs are, and that's helped us also to really make it appeal. We've also used another little media clip that talks about the growing number of veteran suicides we have. and this, the fact that veterans are some of our most productive citizens, and they are also the ones that are so horribly affected after their time of service, and that, we need to make a difference in doing that. So we did this presentation at the local bar leaders conference. We've also gone to local bars. We've made special trips out, for instance, to Bell County to do a training to the lawyers on how to do the clinic and to set them up and walk them through it. And then, we've had like a clinic immediately follow that. In Houston, Kay Sim, who is the executive director there, has created this outreach to the surrounding counties. There are quite a few people down there. And all of the smaller counties around Harris County do not have a fully staffed bar association for permanent employees. And so what Kay did is she created this little network, and the Houston bar goes out and helps host clinics around there in that particular area. I'm trying to think of anything else that I want to tell you about it, but we've got a number of clinics that are up and running. It is especially easier when you have a metropolitan area with a bar staff and permanent folks. But even if you don't, if you just have some conscientious volunteers, somebody who's willing to, talk to the VFW post and bring the box, you can make it happen. And so we've tried to make that easy, and there are additional files in here for substantive law issues. Many of those are city-specific or state-specific, and so we haven't filled those up here in this particular model, but obviously you want to do that for your jurisdiction. And we encourage all of our lawyers in Texas to continue volunteering for the existing clinics. We continue to plague every bar association that hasn't done one or started many more to please get one running. And we hope that many other states will pick it up. I understand we have like 22 other states that are looking at the project. And we highly encourage you to do it. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I've glossed over anything that somebody wants to talk about more intensely.
Texas does it right. It's a great program. You offer...
Can you introduce yourself real quick?
I'm Ken Goldsmith, ABA Governmental Affairs. My portfolio is military and veterans affairs. Do you offer mentoring for people when you start this up and they're going to step forward? Somebody to kind of walk through, here's what you want to look at this first.
Well, I will be in New Mexico on February the 19th to talk to the New Mexico Bar Association and some of their stakeholders about creating this project in New Mexico. So yes, the State Bar of Texas has a budget to go and mentor some other states. So if you have that need, please contact me.
And even lawyer to lawyer. I mean, you wait for lawyers to connect, talk to each other about the issues that come up.
Absolutely. Joanne and I are readily available. We're access to the website. We've got a staff person at the State Bar. If anybody has any questions at any time, we're more than willing to help them out.
Thank you.
I can testify to that. I've called them several times. And if you, I would add, we run a series of clinics not through the Bar Association, but I got one of the clinics in a box, and it was fascinating to look through and compare to what we're doing. So even if you're not following the same model, what they're doing and what they put together is a great, well-organized, project. Something for you to test against what you're doing to make sure that you're doing everything you can.
And we did the same thing. We got on the phone, we actually had the head of California State Bar, talked directly with Terry and get some ideas. Of course, we're in the midst of these enormous support cutbacks right now. It's causing major chaos. But we ordered 2 of the clinics in the box. I've been doing clinical work since 1994. This is the most organized, efficient, and comprehensive tool I've ever seen. And I'll mail it to you for free. So it's not a little plug out there.
I want a box.
Oh, yes. Normally we pass these around, but I don't think that's very useful. So make sure you take a look at it at the end of our program.
I'll put it in the chair over here so y'all are free to browse through it.
Yeah, by the way, Ken Babcock just joined us. I call him our legislative guru. He is an unbelievable resource for anything policy related. If you have issues affecting veterans where you need to go on the Hill and have somebody who can advocate and open doors for you, I recommend a better resource than Ken. My little brother.
Ken, let me mention one thing. We have a Supreme Court justice in Texas by the name of Nathan Heck. He's Republican. He's the longest serving current Supreme Court justice. but he has great ties with the Hill and Congress.
We honored him last year at our big event at Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that we are looking at, and we're getting input from the Texas Veterans Commission and from Justice Eckler's congressional delegation, is what can we do to change the VA rules so that we can get our veterans paid more timely? The date between filing the claim and time of payment is outrageously long. So I just mentioned that because Nathan, Justice Texas, talked with Senator Cornyn, who's our senior senator, and he is very focused on this. And I just mentioned that because I think that's a specific high priority thing we ought to try to figure out. And it's something that even in Washington ought to be accepted by all sides. That's why our veterans get paid more time.
Yes, sir.
So even the Tea Party types would agree with most liberal Democrats. That's what we ought to do. So.
There is, and I won't get into other people's time, but the defense authorization bill that just went through the end of the year requires the secretary to publish, I think by next month, his plan for eliminating the backlog, including benchmarks and timelines. Antonia has joined me in discussions with the Secretary's office, and we've continued since to say, because of that lag time, this is a person who is highly vulnerable, highly needed. Is there something we can give for life-sustaining support while you're taking your time on the rest of it? And they're open, but no resolution. So I agree, and it's great to know we might have a friend on the
hill. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Any questions for our speakers before we pass the line? Again, I really encourage you to look at the clinic in the box before you leave today. Well, thank you both very much. It's an honor to have you here and commend your passion and your magnificent service. The next topic we'll be discussing is integrating family law into the Veterans Court model. And just to lay the framework for this briefly, we're delighted to have representatives from the local Veterans Treatment Courts and the Veteran Justice Outreach workers who are the critical linchpin to that model of providing the court the vehicle and capacity to be able to have alternative sentencing options. To put in perspective, not just the states, we talked about the kind of 25,000-foot level view of what's at stake here in terms of the magnitude of the need. But to put a human face on it, I can't think of anything more powerful than the story of a man named Nathan D'Amico. If any of you have not yet seen the documentary War Torn, 1851 to 2010, that documents PTSD historically from the time of the Civil War to the modern era wars. This young man is featured toward the end of that film. It's incredibly powerful in depicting not only how devastating PTSD is at an individual level, but how it plays out and ripple out effects of destroying the lives of family members who have that young warrior coming back to their home. With respect to Nathan's case, he was a highly decorated Marine, no prior involvement in the criminal justice system. He served 6 years in Iraq. He's now transitioning back through San Diego. On his way back home to San Jose, he does not have a job lined up, so he's going from being a lion in combat, leading men into battle, men and women into battle, to being a nobody, going back into civilian life. He lost 3 of his best friends to roadside bombs. He himself had traumatic brain injury from exposure. And it's the anniversary of his best friend's death, and he does the wrong thing. He gets drunk, he snaps and goes back into combat mode and begins doing checkpoint procedures on a highway with this 45. Comes across a Middle Eastern cab driver, puts him down at gunpoint, takes his wallet, waves him through, nobody's hurt, but he wanders around in dazed confusion with the wallet in his hand. Didn't need money, he had a bank account. Wakes up in a police station and thinks he's had another nightmare about his time in service in Iraq. To find out he's looking at 12 years in prison. He ended up doing a plea bargain in order to avoid a 12-year term. I was so haunted by his experience, we had a private investigator contact his mother. She's on a national campaign to raise awareness of PTSD. And basically to highlight what we're really doing is criminalizing the invisible wounds of war that go untreated. Criminalizing the trauma that is a direct result of here an individual put his life on the line, risked everything he had, lost his best friends, and here he is in prison now serving 6 years in Arizona. To me, that is the core injustice of our day and exactly what is at stake. And the Veteran Treatment Court model has really emerged to help embrace that challenge. If any of you are in Los Angeles, we have our own Veterans Court, but I feel kind of sheepish about this. The real gold standard that I've seen as somebody who's been promoting the model for 3 or 4 years since its inception, is in Santa Ana, run by Judge Wendy Lindley. This woman is a visionary former prosecutor who came on the bench, saw the same people she prosecuted were right back there, saw that the system was broken, decided she wanted to do something differently, began with the drug court, involved in a mental health court, and the components of addiction and trauma are very interrelated and feed off each other. And she developed this Veterans Court, but what she did was she found a department store that she was able to convert, create office space, and then invite community partners to have free rent and work alongside her court. So she embeds her court in a setting where she has 20 ancillary services to have a comprehensive integrated service delivery model that is unbelievable. So if any of you are out our way, I highly encourage you to see her. She's going to retire at the end of the year. Her personal story, her charisma, she was screamed at by other judges. They didn't like the fact that she was a woman judge. They said, we already have one woman judge, that's enough, when she first came to the bench. She really was castigated at one judge's meeting. One of the judges got up and said, you're nothing more than a social worker in robes, which we consider a badge of honor. But she just was persistent. They said, we're not going to support your re-election. She went home and decided, I'm going to do this. If voters want to vote me out of office, fine, but I think I'm doing the right thing. Her recidivism rates are off the chart, unbelievably spectacular. You look at, in California, generally our probationers, our parolees, recidivate within a year about 75% of the time. Hers are less than 5% through a veteran treatment court. I know the Buffalo model, that was the first veteran treatment court in the country, has tracked 0 recidivism, which is just spectacular. We know that when you treat the trauma, we know that when you give these veterans the help they need, help restore their healthy connection with their families, help them reintegrate with the workforce, not only do they benefit, but society benefits. And we avoid the whole issue of the 233,000 Vietnam-era veterans who are now languishing in jail and prison, unproductive, enormous taxpayer expense. So that in sum is kind of what's at stake. And one of the exciting things that happened is an evolution of the model to integrate the fuller facets of issues and put veterans at risk of poor outcomes. And Renato is going to talk about this newest iteration of the veteran treatment programs.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Renato Ischietta, and I'm an attorney with the legal aid side of Orange County, and I wear a lot of different hats there. When I first started there, working in the litigation unit, doing family law, consumer, and then it evolved into doing the homeless, and from there, he became one of the top partners that Paul was talking about through Judge Lindley's court of providing services to homeless and vets. I now have the honor to sit as Judge Pro Tem, Judge Lindley's court, to sub in when she's not able to be a part of what this court does. And I want to give you a really quick story about what kind of happened to me while I was on the bench, and why then I thought we really need to also move into expanding services to vets in the civil arena. The Veterans Treatment Court is a fantastic court. They are absolutely necessary. But in my mind, I started thinking, wow, we really need to also focus about points of entry where vets are touching different parts in our communities where we can provide services. And so I was on the bench, and it was very early. I think it was the second time that I was on. And what had happened was there was a gentleman who was part of the mental health court, which is part of this collaborative court. In the report I read, he was also a vet. He was not in the combat court because his issues didn't merit for him to be in that particular court. In any case, there was a motion by the DA to ask that he be kicked out of the program, not in compliance, and placed into custody. And I further read in the report that this person gets mental health assistance by going and getting medications and so forth. The problem is, once he's cut out of the program, he cannot get those services. And my first inquiry was, when is his next doctor's appointment? Oh, it's this Friday. And to me, it just seemed ludicrous. You're supposed to cut someone out of the program, put them in jail to say what you've done has been very wrong. You won't be able to get your medications, and then on Monday you're out on the street. And I thought, you know, what really needs to be done here is, if I'm not going to cut them out of the program now, I'm going to set it over so Judge Lindley can make that final determination. I'm not going to order that he be taken to custody, or just order for you to please come back. And make sure our order that you go to see your doctor on medication. Even if he is ultimately, you know, cut out, at least he gets his last batch of medications. And I thought, wow, you know, you would think that everybody's on the same page in this issue of our vets, and a lot of people are not. And having that perspective, advocacy to me was like, wow, now I get it. Felt kind of foolish thinking, well, I thought just advocacy was, you know, being a lawyer, you know, take on these cases, and I'm like, well, boy, did I have it wrong. And I thought there's another problem. It kind of sad that the vets that we help through this great court have done something bad to get this wraparound service. Or can we also provide services for wraparound where perhaps vets are touching? And I thought, well, what I can do is, I know that I do civil. How about family law court? Particularly, and this was a bit controversial, I heard of Judge Hurwitz had this wanted to do this program where there is a restraining order filed against the veteran. His model is, well, if we can have the victim agree to allow the vet to get rehabilitation services, we allow that to provide the wraparound. Have that individual come back to the court every few months to report as an assigned social worker, getting medical help. The victim's also coming to court to report how things are going. Her temporary restraining order is still in full force and effect. That has not been dismissed. And the hope is that at the end of this program, which is about a year, if the vet is able to demonstrate changed behavior, that final restraining order will not be issued, it will actually be dismissed. And the significance of that, what I believe, is huge, because a civil family law restraining order really has this huge domino effect. It's reported in a central state database, which means that it will be very difficult for them to take certain types of jobs. Anything in the security field or law enforcement can't carry a firearm. They will have trouble then, if they can't get a job, to pay any support obligations. That order also has a presumption you can't have any custody. And so the feeling is, well, perhaps it's better to maybe help change that behavior. And I thought, what a fantastic model. So I contacted the judge and said, hey, you know, I'm really interested in doing something like this, but I think it needs to be a little more. And he said, well, what do you mean? I go, well, I think it's absolutely important that, you know, we do the advocacy and to see if we can help the vet with the restraining order, absolutely. But there's a lot, many other issues that they may have. For example, there could be a lot of other family law issues associated with that, you know, because the restraining order is going to primarily take care of certain issues, but there could be a divorce in there. There could be, you know, all these other issues related to the children, ongoing after the restraining order, issues relating to guardianships. What's happened to some vets, in which I have one, their mental illness hasn't backed out. If you have any weapons in the home, and there's children in the home, guess what? It's a big domino effect. Those kids are pulled out of that house. Someone else is coming in now and most likely establishing a guardianship over children. So now that vet is having to deal with that in either juvenile dependency court or probate court. Economic issues. Our vets have economic problems. And a lot of these problems actually stem before they even go into service. Tax issues, owing money. All of this are just a little piece of this big puzzle that I thought, wow, the civil sphere really can be a really big help to our vets. And I think that providing some sort of access to them through the court system is one way to be able to serve those needs. And I further go on to say that, and I really love, I think the Texas model, because your model is really about the points where they're tapping in. Sometimes, one place you think they're going to go, maybe that isn't the most important, but when you find a place where you can have them gain access. And I really want to pour about the importance of this issue of the advocacy part. We're always programmed about, it's always about, winning the case, and, if it's not a great case, don't take it. Or, what I've had to do quite a bit, I've had to learn a lot of different areas of law, to be quite honest. And it's been both scary and very exciting. And I've taken on cases that I probably would not have taken on some years ago. And I always remember when my managed attorneys told me, sometimes, you may not know how to deal with that case precisely, but you know how to think, and you know how to advocate. And I think that when we do that, we really do help our vets. And so I try to bring on other attorneys who may not have a lot of knowledge of family law or housing cases. I tell them that's okay. There are areas of law that we can all learn and advocate for them. And I think that having really now this perspective, on the bench, whenever I have an attorney who advocates for their client well, even though I don't agree, sometimes I'm like, no, I don't agree. But boy, I really respect that attorney. And I really see, wow, they're really trying to change that, individual's life. So I'm here to really hope to promote really about looking at different ways in your communities where you can provide those access points to reach out. And it doesn't have to be this exact model here. This is just one model which, I looked at and thought, wow, this is what I can do. You may create a model where they're touching in where services can be provided. And I just want to also say, please don't forget about the civil service. I think it's so very important for them because it's part of that big puzzle. Thank you.
Any questions for Renato? Yes. Diane and Sarah.
I have projected, and it also relates back to Terry and Joanne's presentation also, because I thought of something when you were talking about your clinic that Renato touched on, which is this, I think, I see, and I was the pro bono director of the Legal Aid Foundation in LA for a few years before I moved over to Levitt and Quinn, and what I see with pro bono attorneys is this absolutely risk adverse, if I'm not an expert in that area, I don't want to touch it. Perspective, which I get, you said scary, it is scary. And I was thinking with this clinic in a box and what you're talking about, who's willing to get in there and, because I agree with you, you know how to think. And just having a lawyer look at some little problem and give you some ideas of the next steps to take is huge for people and can change their lives. How do you get folks to do that? Or are you seeing that work? Have you been able to convince people? What are the obstacles?
Well, I will say this. Most of the clinics, at least the Austin clinic, is covered insurance-wise under our volunteer legal services locally. And so we're not seeing that reaction from our lawyers, and maybe that's why, because they know there's ultimately malpractice coverage. But I also don't think that people are really going way outside what they know. And often lawyers know enough to know they need to call somebody with expertise in a particular area. We have sections of our local bar and we have sections of our state bar where we can call the chair. In fact, we've asked for our state bar sections to create some expert panels for us, so that if we have people coming into clinics and they have bankruptcy needs, I have no idea how to help them, but I can tell them who they can call, or we can consult somebody. And that's also true of the local bar association. We've had sections do wills clinics for deploying Marines, because they are the estate and probate planning section, and that is what we do. So although there is a need for some specific help, we're trying to get that. And we've sort of avoided the other problem of lawyers saying, I'm not going to even go there because we've gotten the insurance coverage. Now, I don't know if you're going to have that much more of an obstacle. If you don't have that, that might be a problem, but I think you can still do the recruitment of people who are knowledgeable in certain areas, and we know what kinds of cases we see.
The other thing, one of the pamphlets that she mentioned that was prepared by our Texas Young Lawyers Association, which is sort of a service arm of the state bar, was a pamphlet for lawyers advising lawyers of the kinds of issues they may face at a particular clinic. And I think once lawyers see, they get more comfortable with the fact that a lot of the issues are issues that are sort of common sense in nature. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a legal genius to give them some guidance that will be of assistance. Like when Joanne and I went to our homeless shelter in Austin, we basically conducted a focus group, getting veterans from the homeless shelter to tell us what their problems were. As Joanne said, the biggest problem wasn't a legal problem, it was just getting bus tokens to go out to the VA clinic. We can take care of bus tokens, no problemo. And you don't have to have a law degree to figure that out. So I think once lawyers understand that basic concept, it's easier to get them to respond.
I'll also say this, we also try to staff the clinic. I mean, like we see a certain number of Social Security disability claims in every clinic, and the legal aid folks know those things. So you have, and they generally show up at every clinic. We have 1 or 2 people there where if you have an SSI deal, you go see them because they know it. And so we try and sort of staff to meet what we expect.
And I think, I would just add that, we do many of the same things, that, we try to set a tone to say, look, what we'd like you to do is to try on to maybe take on some of these more interesting cases, and you'll have a go-to person. For example, I do a lot of IRS tax work for tax court. People don't want to do that with a 10-foot pole. I said, it's fun, great work. They said, why? Because it's an opportunity on the federal government. And what do? I go, get their story, why they owe the money. And you're going to listen to some really amazing stories. And bring that story back. Okay, they bring the story back. Wow. This has been their whole life here. Now we're going to sell it to the IRS to say, yeah, you owe $10,000 based on their economics, plus what they've gone through. We're going to offer you, maybe IRS on this $10,000 debt. Maybe $100. Oh, well, what do we do then? Well, this is the form we're going to do together. And so a lot of times it's definitely providing the support. So it isn't just like sink or swim.
We did a series of CLE lunchtime events at a law firm in Minneapolis. They opened it up to other firms, and we cherry-picked what were sort of seen by the pro bono coordinators as easier issues for brief advice. So in-state child support, debt collection under Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, criminal expenses. And they knew going in they weren't responsible for the entire case, just brief advice. And we had the attorneys for the trickier cases at the clinics anyway, and that made a lot of the attorneys who were coming from a tax background or a corporate background more comfortable at the clinics. And then to be honest, once we got them into the clinics and they saw everybody working their asses off to get the job done, they were too embarrassed to say, I'm not willing to try this or look this up on the internet. So once you get them in the door, you can kind of shame them into taking on.
I love it. Yeah. That's great. And we do the same thing in Baltimore. We get them in through the door through expungements, which I think is one of the easiest things you can do that has a huge impact on their life in terms of getting jobs and access to housing. And we do, after they've done expungements for a couple of months, say, you could do veterans benefits, you take our training and apply for your accreditation, and it's yes, it's about enticing, I think.
I just want to, since we have the ABA here, I want to say one really big, huge issue that we see in the clinics is we get interstate child support and divorce and family law issues. And there's no way for an Austin lawyer to handle the guy who filed for a divorce in Kentucky and has a temporary order there that gives his spouse half of his, veterans pay, and then he went to North Carolina to get the divorce finalized, but there was no property breach. And I would love it if we had some sort of a network ultimately of these types of clinics so that there was some mechanism of referral, because we don't have it now. And it seems like almost half the people that come in for those kinds of family law or child support or marriage cases are talking about states other than Texas.
Well, meet Sarah.
There is a list on the ABA website of attorneys doing veterans work in each state, and they're great entry points to try to find contacts, but I've talked to several people in the room. I'm trying to work on a scheme involving the SSBF funding and how we could possibly use that to pay out-of-state attorneys to represent on interstate child support cases. We have it, it's a federal grant. If we can qualify the veteran under the program in Minnesota and they have a San Diego child support case, I've yet to figure out the block to us actually using that funding to pay the legal aid group in San Diego a flat fee for representing that veteran. And so it would just be creating the network of the SSBF grantees and local legal services providers to be able to do cross referrals, so that if they have some funding, we're paying $1,000 flat rate per case. I've yet to figure out how it wouldn't work that we would be able to pay someone out of state if we can qualify the veteran in the state where the SSBF funding is received.
And I looked at it from our end in California about whether we could do that in LA County, trying to find a hole in it. We're both trying to find holes in it. And it's my opinion that although we're supposed to be serving families in LA County, the fact is that the money's coming back into California. If any money's coming, the case is getting taken off the books in California. We're leaving the court system and so forth and so on. So I can't see why helping a Minnesota vet with a California case would qualify for my mission, which is to work in LA County. So I think it's a possibility.
Great. And at the bare minimum, so this year, the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, which helped to update the list that Sarah referenced, all the organizations, legal services, state bar that help veterans, we're going to reduce that list to just the organizations that help with child support matters. And right now, we know a number of those groups. You know, Jeff Youngman called me, 6 months ago. I've got someone with Maryland child support arrears, So we coordinate a little bit, but we're hoping this year that list will be up there at the bare minimum, and then hopefully we can get some dollars behind it. Right.
And which part of the website is it posted?
It would be on the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty's website itself, which is right on this flyer. So you can access this longer list of organizations that do anything for veterans off of that website as well. But hopefully it'll be up soon.
Anything, it might be one extra jump, but anything we talk around the table, no matter what ABA entity it comes from, and even when we heard first thing about hearing Terry during his term, it all goes up through AmericanBar.org/veterans. And it's supposed to be kind of a portal to collect all the good things happening. So that's the direct source. That's a great way to check in whatever it is.
And also the Coordinating Committee on Veterans Benefits and Services website is very powerful too.
And that's the site, yeah.
I have to say, I had let my ABA membership lapse until I saw the work they were doing on the veterans front and on the poverty front.
This meeting is void.
Seriously, ABA has been an amazing driving force to help attorneys who want to help but need the help of other attorneys, to join force. And I just can't say enough about the great leadership they've shown, especially when it comes to veterans. Our presidents of the last 2 years have done a shout out to membership to step up and do pro bono work. And this room is just a small representation of that response. We're now very excited to turn over to Brock Hunter to talk about the work he's doing with respect to helping veterans with PTSD who are enmeshed in our criminal justice system.
Bear with me while I fire up the PowerPoint.
And these are veterans who may not have access to the veteran treatment court, so this is a whole component that is vital.
Well, I'm getting set up here. I would just note, as Paul and Terry indicated, in many ways, this generation of veterans coming home now are going to be facing a lot of issues, and we're going to be dealing with them in the criminal justice system, I think, in ways that overshadow even the Vietnam generation, which was quite significant, as Paul noted. Anyone watching the news this week and paying any attention to this in this context is just getting barraged with this very issue. Just 1 week ago, just outside of Dallas here, a highly decorated Navy SEAL veteran was murdered by a man, reportedly a young veteran with PTSD, who he was trying to help, and I understand now he is facing the death penalty on 2 counts of first-degree murder here in Texas. Out in Alabama this week, we had a standoff with a Vietnam veteran who had taken a child hostage into a bunker and who was killed in a hostage rescue. And then just last night, I couldn't help being glued to the TV in my hotel room as we watched the news of a Iraq Naval Reserve veteran, former LA police officer who has apparently gone to war with the Los Angeles Police Department over his firing over a failed whistleblower claim. I watch the news like this on a regular basis, and it seems over the last several years we've seen an acceleration of stories like this, of troubled veterans in the news for contact with the criminal justice system, and it feels as if that is accelerating. A lot of the folks that I work with talk about the coming tsunami of veterans into the criminal court system in the coming years, and it feels as if the wave is starting to break on our shores. And I fear that we're going to be seeing more and more of these kinds of stories in the news in the coming months and years. And so to that end, I think it's vital that we educate the public and the criminal justice system in particular on what we're dealing with here and why, so that we can respond in a more pragmatic and less of a knee-jerk way to the way that we're dealing with the veterans coming into the system. Unlike Vietnam, we still have a lot of empathy in the public for our veterans coming home with these kinds of problems. My fear is that if we keep having these high-profile cases, that public sympathy may start to wane and the empathy within the justice system may start to wane unless we work very hard to inoculate the public and the justice system to prepare them for what's coming, and so we can deal with it in a less emotional and a more constructive way. So for the last several years, I've been involved in advocacy, going around the country training judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, law enforcement on post-traumatic stress and its ties to criminal behavior and how we can do a better job this time around than we did with the Vietnam generation and those prior to it. And that I've done presentations, I think some of the people in this room have seen, including at this meeting in Chicago a few months ago. Today, though, I'm going to be talking about a book I've been working on for the past couple of years that is a collaborative effort with a number of folks from around the country, experts in their own areas, to very systematically assist attorneys and other justice professionals in learning all of the things that they need to know to effectively represent veterans in the system. It was a couple summers ago I was first contacted by an individual who had been working in this area with the Vietnam generation 40 years ago. Really one of the pioneers of bringing PTSD into the court system, one of the pioneers who helped establish the vet center system for the VA, and who traveled around the country with a small team in the 1980s defending veterans charged with primarily capital murder cases, saving a number of them from the death penalty. And that group put together a book in the late 80s called Defending the Vietnam Combat Veteran that was the first and since then only one of its kind to really address how to effectively represent veterans in criminal court. And his idea was we need a new version of this book for this new generation of veteran. And he had heard about me and the work I'm doing and sought me out to partner with him to write this book. And we started out with the idea it was just going to be the two of us and maybe a couple of other people. But as we talked about it, we realized that in the last 40 years, we've learned a heck of a lot about this stuff that we didn't know right after Vietnam. Those guys were working with almost no support from the public or the court system, but very little scientific support either for what they were trying to accomplish. And fortunately, we're not so unblessed. We have a lot to work with here. And it was quickly apparent to us that we really need to bring in folks who are experts in their particular fields of expertise on these issues and get as much of that expertise into this book as possible. And so we set out starting to recruit some of my heroes in this area, folks from the tops of their fields from all across the country, each of whom we convinced to contribute pro bono a chapter to this book on their particular area of expertise. And I and my associate, a young combat veteran, recent graduate from law school, and a couple of our clerks, also veterans, have been working to write several of the chapters and edit the rest over the last couple of years to put this thing together. And it has grown and grown and grown, and been delayed a number of times for various reasons as we've added new contributors. But we're really right now on the cusp of publishing this thing, and it's really going to be something I think that's going to be a benefit, not just to criminal justice professionals, but I think probably to mental health professionals working with veterans in the criminal system as well. The book is going to be, we estimate, about 900 pages, including a 350-page appendix. And so it's a monster. It's going to be a doorstop, and we're going to see if we can get maybe backpack straps on the back cover of it.
Oops.
And that's the end of my presentation.
That was a downer, wasn't it? Sorry, Brock.
No problem, Steve. As we're working to resolve our AV issues.
Yeah, don't rely on me.
The book is divided into 4 major sections. The first of them, 4 chapters, is historical and sociological chapters, essentially. The second is chapters by medical and mental health professionals. And
I don't know.
I
just know how to bring things.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Well, that's fan, and then there's lamp too.
Usually these 2 times.
Oh, wait, gotta hit it again.
Yeah. Stand by input.
Well, we appreciate you being brave enough to step up.
I thank you for that. My language.
Thank you, Ken.
Produce nothing. I don't know.
And Binder just ran out of the room.
Right.
It's
there's a light.
There you go. You've got it.
I'll take credit.
Don't touch it. There you go.
Success.
Ah. All right. And of course my clicker's not working. All right. So here is just a quick kind of overview of the sections. We got a dedication from Senator Max Cleland and a foreword from Representative Bob Filner, both very, very strong advocates for veterans justice issues. The first section, as I was indicating, is several chapters that deal with sort of historical and sociological connections of combat trauma and crime. Section 2 is the medical psychological section, as we call it, and section 3 is military cultural competency, basically, but understanding your veteran clients and where they're coming from and how to effectively bond with them in a way that they'll trust you to properly represent them in court. And then finally, the last section is really where the rubber meets the road. Having built up with all of these things, the final section are multiple chapters on the mechanics of defending veterans, from full-on insanity defenses to sentencing mitigation to veterans courts, and even a chapter on how to start veterans courts in jurisdictions where they don't already exist. Digging down a little bit into the first section, my chapter, Echoes of War, is the first chapter of the book, and it really plays as sort of a roadmap to the rest of the book. This is modeled after my Echoes of War presentation and paper that first brought me to the attention of the guy who wanted to publish this book. And it provides a lot of background on the history of combat trauma and its ties to criminal behavior, documented crime waves that have followed every major conflict, both here in America and in European countries have also documented similar types of crime waves, and efforts underway across the country to do better this time around, from the Veterans Court movement to sentencing mitigation statutes to the work of the ABA and other groups represented here in this room. Chapter 2 is by Dr. Jonathan Shea, who really is one of my heroes in this area. He authored the books Achilles in Vietnam and Odysseus in America that really planted the seeds for me more than a decade ago about how combat trauma can lead to criminal behavior, and really informed my early work with veterans in the system. Chapter 3 is by Shad Meshad, the individual I referenced earlier, who was a psych officer in Vietnam and then later went on to do work on the streets of Los Angeles with homeless veterans that led to the Vet Center program. And he also then was part of the group that traveled the country defending veterans in criminal cases throughout the 80s and helped publish that earlier book. And chapter 4 is by Dr. William or Bud Brown, a Vietnam combat veteran, now sociology professor, who has testified as an expert witness in a number of murder cases around the country involving Iraq and Afghan veterans. And his chapter talks about what we call the military total institution, the effects of modern military combat training and conditioning on those with post-traumatic stress disorder, and how untreated that training and conditioning can exacerbate and often increase the odds that someone with PTSD is going to act out in violent and other aberrant ways. Again, this is just a little more detail on each of these chapters. Section 2 is the medical psychological section, and this we put really close to the front because, again, I think attorneys need to have some basic understanding of the science and medicine behind these conditions. They don't have to be experts in them, but they need to understand them so that they can see them in their own client, so that they know when they need to get a real expert, an MD or PhD, to come in and assess their clients and be able to have an intelligent conversation with that expert about what's going on with the client. Chapters 6 and 7 are by Dr. Daniel Dosa and Dr. Ernie Boswell, both Vietnam veterans, both of whom spent careers in the VA system before going into private practice, and both of whom are now actively involved in testifying as expert witnesses on veteran PTSD cases around the country. The first is an overview of post-traumatic stress disorder and its diagnostic criteria, and the second talks about the specific issues in forensic evaluations for PTSD and bringing PTSD into court. And the next is a chapter on traumatic brain injury by Dr. Ronald Glasser and Dr. Trisanne Gordon. Dr. Glasser was an Army doctor in Vietnam. He wrote a book about that experience called 365 Days. And then more recently, he wrote a book called Broken Bodies and Shattered Minds, a medical odyssey from Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan. Dr. Trisanne Gordon is a doctor in Ohio who has had a VA contract working with veterans with traumatic brain injury. And their chapter looks at this new injury, so to speak. TBI is a new thing because our veterans are surviving blasts that would have killed them in past conflicts. Because of body armor and modern military medicine, we have a high survival rate. These folks are coming home with these injuries caused by the shock waves that travel through their body and shake up their brains within their skulls and cause these physical injuries that we're just now starting to understand. And we're starting to realize that these physical injuries can lead to aberrant and sometimes impulsive violent behavior.
Dr. Gordon doing a documentary too, I think.
That's right. Dr. Gordon is working on a documentary called Operation Resurrection about traumatic brain injuries among veterans that should be coming out here very soon. I have to apologize. I put this thing together at the last minute and I'm kind of skipping over some of these slides. Next in the lineup in section 2 is talking about the interaction of substance abuse and PTSD and TBI by Dr. Walter Busatil. Dr. Busatil is a British psychiatrist who served in the British military for many, many years. He treated, among other people, the hostages from Beirut that came back in the early 80s. And he now helps run a treatment organization called Combat Stress in Britain that is treating young Iraq and Afghan veterans for alcohol and substance abuse issues tied to PTSD. And we found him because he was one of the few people who had actually published research papers on ties between substance abuse and these invisible injuries. And he was more than happy to contribute. It's just an amazing chapter for us. Next chapter is talking about the overprescription of psychotropic drugs for military personnel by Dr. Peter Breggin. Dr. Breggin has testified before Congress about his concerns that the psychiatric profession in particular is overprescribing psychiatric drugs to those with traumatic brain injuries and PTSD. And he says, it's not that those drugs don't have a place in treatment, but in many cases they're prescribed to people who really have no business getting these drugs. And with people with these conditions, some drugs can actually exacerbate these problems, can lead to what he feels suicidal behavior and other aberrant behavior that can get them into trouble. And then Dr. Billings has also testified before Congress on this issue, and his chapter focuses on specifically the military's overuse of these types of medications for troops suffering from PTSD and TBI. He notes, among other things, that prior to 9/11, troops that were prescribed these drugs were not deployable into the war zone. They were considered not deployable, too unstable, too many concerns. But today, as he notes, a huge portion of people deploying into combat, particularly for their second, third, or fourth deployments, who have diagnosed mental health issues already, are being ordered to take these medications so that they can be deployed, so that they can be functional in the combat zone. And it creates all kinds of problems, exposing them to additional trauma, exacerbating their injuries further, and leading to further problems down the road. In the last chapter of that medical psychological section is by Dr. Don Elvard, another Vietnam combat vet, now a psychologist at Hazelden Treatment Center up in Minnesota. And Don has spent a lot of his spare time over the years looking at the way that indigenous cultures have treated combat trauma over the millennia. And his chapter looks at Native American tribes and other groups, including tribes in South Africa who have been treating their own after the battles in apartheid, and looking at the kind of spiritual and more holistic ways that various cultures have treated combat trauma and the ways in which some of those practices are being incorporated into modern therapies today. The third section, the military cultural competence section, starts with a chapter by Major Evan Simone, who many of you have probably heard of. He's an Army JAG officer who's written extensively on the role of lawyers as counselors in representing veterans with post-traumatic stress in criminal cases, noting that very often these veterans are coming in having never been diagnosed with anything before, being very resistant to the idea that they have an invisible injury, and the vital role that the defense attorney plays in constructively raising these issues and getting the veteran to open up to the idea that they may have a problem, that there's no shame in getting help for it, and that they need to cooperate with this process in order to have their case properly handled in court. He also notes that the additional stress of criminal cases can often lead to suicidal thoughts and actions among clients, and how an attorney needs to learn psychological first aid techniques to essentially triage their client and then get them into the hands of mental health professionals who can help them. The next chapter is by David Ferrier. He is one of the folks that was involved in the publication of that original book back in 1980s. He was a Vietnam combat vet, medic in Vietnam, who then worked as a social worker in the VA system, and then finally as a private investigator for this traveling veterans defense team in the 80s. And he writes a chapter on how to obtain and interpret military records of your clients, a vital skill that defense attorneys have to acquire. Chapter 15 is by Hector Matas Castillo. He is the veteran I believe Paul was referring to from Minnesota, who is a former special operations soldier with now 13 combat deployments under his belt, whose untreated, undiagnosed mental health issues back in the early 2000s led to a dissociative flashback and ultimately an armed standoff with the police that fortunately ended peacefully, and it resulted in Hector coming into the criminal court system where he got some help for his condition. His case was way before the Veterans Court movement, but his case was handled very much in the spirit of Veterans Court. And he was given an opportunity to avoid a felony conviction in exchange for him getting the treatment that he needed. And he has now since gone on to get his own master's degree in social work and is now a licensed clinical social worker working in Minnesota with other veterans charged with crimes, and is heading up a men's batterers treatment group for the Minneapolis Veterans Court. So all of the veterans coming into the court charged with domestic violence offenses are sent to the Domestic Abuse Project in Minneapolis, where Hector has this men's veterans group that he runs, and he's in charge of treating these guys. So a story that has a lot of lessons in it, his own road to the bottom, as he puts it, how he got into the trouble he did, how he perceived the criminal justice system as he was going through the process, how he got the help he did, and what he's really done with the second chance he was given. The next chapter is co-authored by 3 women veterans talking about the specific issue women's veterans face. The first co-author is Trista Matas Castillo, Hector's wife, who is a former Marine officer, Woman Veteran of the Year in Minnesota last year, among many other things that she's done. And the other two are my clerks, Catherine O'Connor and Mary Beth Boyce, both veterans themselves as well, and law students who have been volunteering their time on this book. And then finally, the legal section. We start out the legal section with another overview chapter that I co-wrote with my associate that covers all of the various defenses, sentencing mitigation, plea bargaining techniques, and everything else that goes into defending veterans in court, citing to each of the following chapters where appropriate. And then the following chapters drill down into each of those subjects with pretrial preparation and negotiations, taking a case to trial by Mark Usario, the attorney who successfully defended Jesse Brachter, the first Iraq veteran to have a successful PTSD-based insanity defense out in Oregon, and sentencing mitigation strategies and techniques as well. We have a chapter by Tom Plunkett and my associate Ryan Else on veterans cases in federal court. The federal sentencing guidelines have recently had some modifications that allow veteran service to be brought in as a consideration in sentencing. And there are even a handful now of federal veterans courts that are beginning to spring up around the country, which is a really interesting phenomenon. Chapter 23, Veterans Treatment Courts, is by Judge Robert Russell, who founded the first Veterans Treatment Court out in Buffalo, New York. And he talks about his experience in founding his court, as well as the different models of veterans courts that are evolving around the country, and how they vary best practices and whatnot. And then the final chapter of the book is by Justice Evelyn Stratton, an Ohio Supreme Court justice who has been very involved in the national level with veterans criminal justice issues. She helped, among other things, found the Veterans Justice Outreach Program that I do agree is absolutely the most critical part of all of the stuff that we're doing. And she just recently retired early from the bench in order to devote her time full time to working on veterans justice issues around the country. Her chapter is about what attorneys and others can do in their own jurisdictions when they don't have anything going on. We've got a lot of veterans courts popping up around the country, but it's still a tiny fraction of the jurisdictions out there. And her chapter is a roadmap for the local attorney who may want to get something started in their jurisdiction, with advice on how to get the ball rolling, who to talk to, who to network with, and how to get some momentum going to get something started. And then finally, there's this 350-page appendix that just kept growing as we were working on it, because we realized that, you know, defense attorneys oftentimes lean kind of to the left. They probably haven't served in the military. They don't know a lot about military culture, and they need some nuts and bolts information to help them figure stuff out. So we have a chapter just on the overview of the military branches and their respective missions. Chronological histories of the Iraq and Afghan wars with benchmarks to help them understand the context of when and where their clients served and why that might be important, where they can start digging down for some more additional information on their client's service. The military's job, rank, pay scale structures, job codes, again, back to those military records. And then a guide to the medals, commendations, and qualifications so that they can understand what that Bronze Star on their client's DD-214 means, why that's significant, what a Purple Heart means, all of those things that to a civilian may not really have a lot of import, but really play a huge role in explaining their client's story. And then we have an exhaustive list of resources, everything that we've got in our dog-eared files that we are going to for just resources on anywhere veterans can go to get assistance in government, nonprofits, etc. And then a list of checklists of questionnaires, competency worksheets for attorneys, clinical interview forms, TBI screening tools, and then finally a sample sentencing memorandum from a homicide case that I had a couple years ago that kept a client out of prison. So it's going to, like I said, be about 900 pages. We're in the last couple weeks of editing, and we hope to have it in print in April. Thank you.
Any questions for Brock?
Thank you.
Brock has been very generous too in going around and educating criminal defense attorneys, judges, those involved in the criminal justice system on PTSD and how devastating it is, you know, taking into account the clinical approaches and resources that can avail the courts so they can ensure that these veterans get proper treatment.
One last slide that I forgot to mention is we do have a website that we just throw up. It's very bare bones right now, but it is the point where you'll be able to go in and order the book. You can even pre-order it now, the veteransdefenseproject.org. The Veterans Defense Project is a nonprofit that we have founded just within the last year to basically be the publisher of this book, and we plan to have a website that will serve as an ongoing hub of communication for attorneys, mental health professionals, representing veterans, and the ability to network for experts around the country, and to continue to put up information that's coming out, because quite frankly the book is going to be out of date the week after it's published. So we're going to keep putting stuff up there. We're looking at publishing an electronic version of the book as well as the big hardcover that will be much cheaper than the big hardcover with backpack straps on it. So that's the website that you'll be able to go to order the book and get all this other information. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Before we move on to congressional information cards and Jason Vale, I just wanted to share with you that we discovered there are federal veterans courts emerging around the country. Judge Paul Warner in Utah started the first one. Very fascinating to see the models that they're using. These often, right now they're involving minor charges. You know, for example, if you get a ticket on VA grounds for speeding, quality of life offense, but you end up in federal court. Well, it's a great opportunity because it may be the first point of contact with a combat veteran to engage them with issues of untreated PTSD, but and before they spill over into more serious offenses and antisocial behavior. And his court has been phenomenally successful. And one of the most important facets that we just learned about was the challenge coin. You know, familiar with the tradition of the challenge coin? Yeah, I'm going to pass this around so you can see it along with this pamphlet. But upon graduation, the veteran gets a challenge coin. Normally it's used as a point of pride. Your commander, you do something valorous in battle, and your commander rewards you with a challenge coin, and then when you go into a bar, you basically challenge another veteran and say, do you have your coin with you? If they do, you buy the drinks. If they don't, they have to buy you a drink. Well, for sobriety purposes, because addiction is a huge part of what's driving behavior, this plays the opposite role. That it's a reminder of how hard that veterans work to overcome the issues of trauma and PTSD and addiction. So when they're on the point of relapse, they reach in their pocket, they have this coin, and it reminds them of how much work they devoted and the pride in their achievement. So I'll pass this around, and then we're now going to turn over to Jason Vale to talk about the congressional.
Thanks. I'll stand up since I'm hidden back here in the corner. Paul asked me to come and just talk a little bit about a project that we just did, the Standing Committee on Legal Assistance for Military Personnel, but let me just take a second and just tell you very briefly about what we do, since it's a little bit different in terms of focus. The LAMP Committee, our jurisdictional statement in the ABA bylaws, says that we exist to support the delivery of high-quality legal, civil legal services to military personnel and their dependents. Legal assistance is defined under 10 U.S.C. 1044, which says that the military services are authorized to deliver free legal assistance services to not only active duty service personnel, but veterans as well. So our charge does at least sort of indirectly encompass veterans, although for all practical purposes, we tend to be focused mainly on the active duty side because the limitations that military legal assistance has, they can't go to court. Those lawyers, the JAGs and the civilian legal assistance attorneys generally can't go to court, often aren't licensed in the jurisdictions where they're stationed and so on. So the range of services they can provide is very limited. So one of the ways we have worked in the committee to address this in the past few years is we've seen ongoing deployments and overseas activity that has generated a lot higher need for legal services. We've gotten far more engaged in the kind of direct legal assistance delivery in conjunction with the services that we have done historically. One of the ways we've done that is by establishing our National Military Pro Bono Project, which is 5 years old this year, in which we work with the military legal assistance services to take those cases that require representation, but the military attorney can't provide, and move that case to a ready and willing pro bono attorney wherever the case is situated, which, as was mentioned earlier, often is a cross-jurisdictional kind of situation where the service member is stationed in one state, but a suit has been filed in another state. And many of the cases we receive actually come from overseas, whether it's stationed in Japan or deployed in Afghanistan or whatever. We see a lot of cases coming from there. So it's been a very successful project. In 2012, we placed a little over 200 cases with pro bono attorneys in a full range of civil legal matters. The services that are delivered by our volunteers, when we do the closing data, they report the value of the donated billable hours, at least for the past year, about $1 million of donated billable hours. So it's a great service to the military families that receive it, and we're happy to continue providing it. One of the other projects we embarked on a couple years ago, primarily with public education, was to develop an online legal resource center for military members and veterans as a kind of a first place to go to get basic legal information that's accessible to them, it's understandable, covering a variety of topics that are of use to them, SCRA, military, family law issues, so on and so forth. So that's our ABA Homefront website, and it's intended mainly to be an entry point to get some basic legal information and then help that person find actual in-person legal assistance. So we have a national directory of programs on there, and it also is intended to be a conduit for those clients who can go to legal assistance to go there and then move to a pro bono project, and also as an entry point for attorneys who want to volunteer. So Paul asked me to speak about this because one just sort of little project we came up with. I don't know what happened to Ken. Oh, there he is. It was actually Ken's idea, so to give credit where credit is due. He thought, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had these information cards branded with the ABA logo and with the Homefront information that we could hand out to staffers on Capitol Hill and every office there, so that when they receive a constituent call that involves some sort of military issue, they would have a quick reference to turn to. So we developed these little cards, and I brought a pack of them, and I'll go ahead and pass them out. It's got the Homefront information on the front, and then what we thought we would do is just have a quick checklist of some very high-level places to turn for specific types of legal problems, employment problems, or benefits problems, things like that. It's not meant to be a comprehensive list, but just a quick, here are some ideas of places where the military member or veteran can turn, but then go to ABA Homefront to find more detailed information. So I'll pass these out. Feel free to take, a few if you'd like. I don't know if you have anything to add on.
Yeah, I think one key component, especially since Terry's here, for example, and I know other states too, the idea is not for the ABA to be the resource. I mean, our military, we are a number or a place we can go. ABA Homefront is a connection, a collaboration of all of the state programs. So when they come in and they go to ABA Homefront for the answer to their Texas question, they get connected with the Texas service. Right. And that's our relevance. And so I think it's a great partnership opportunity.
Yeah, there's a national map on there, and the military veteran could click on the state. So if you click on Texas, the Texas program comes up with a list of programs that are listed there. And so this card we're sort of adapting and developing to other purposes. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, has a program that provides financial education and resources to military families. They go out to the bases around the country and hand out their packets of information to educate about financial issues specific to military members. And so we've adapted the backside of that card a little bit. We've got 10,000 of those being put into their packets for service members who have a financial issue, maybe have a legal issue that they might also need some help with. And Paul's idea was to maybe create a special kind of card that has the local contact information on the backside. He provided it for your area, and we'll be putting that up for printing next. And so, we're happy to do that kind of thing. We, as Ken says, we like to partner as much as possible with the local programs and local jurisdictions. So happy to do that. And our chair, General Earhart, is here. I don't know if you have anything else to add about we're working on.
No, I do want to pile on to what Ken was saying, and that is that because sometimes when we've talked to state bars, they're somewhat concerned that there's a competition out there, and we've been very clear that no, we're there to help you, if anything, because none of us can get this done by ourselves, and if we're not all working together, then we're pointed in the wrong direction, because there's enough work out here to do for all the state bars and the American Bar Association, and the more we can get out there, the more we can collaborate like you're doing, the better off we are. And so I kind of wanted to highlight that, because I think all this is designed to point in that direction to help veterans.
Well, you said a key thing, none of us can do this on our own, and it gave me an excuse to share a story about one of my sons. And the moral of the story is there's things we can never do individually that we can do if we join our hands together. So I'm going to bore out the commissioner members because they heard this 1,000 times. But we used to play basketball with our clerks after work, and one day my wife had to drop my sons. And I was in the middle of the game. It was the first time they saw me play organized basketball. And you hear, Daddy, Daddy, I got all pumped up to make a basket. And I look over, and David, the oldest one, who's 5, walks over. He's playing by himself, paying no attention. But Leo, my youngest, is watching me very intently, sucking his thumb. And at the end of the game, I go running up to him. I said, Leo, you see Daddy make a basket? He goes, so you see me make 2 baskets? He goes, so you don't look very impressed. He goes, Daddy, how come you can't slam dunk it like Shaq? Well, look at me, you know that would never happen. But if my teammates put their hands together and lifted me up, not only could I slam dunk, we could do that for each other. And I love that story because it really epitomizes what we try to do collectively around this table, is join forces with each other to make that difference.
Before we close?
Yes, we're not closing yet. We still have Jeff Conway is going to do a quick presentation as well. But go ahead.
No. I want to stop at you. Go.
All right, we'll go back to Steve. Oh, that thought.
Were you going to unplug something again?
Well, you're on to me.
I will, in a past life, I was a staffer on the Hill. I worked for U.S. Senator, and one of the skills I learned was to figure out whether you need to give a 20-second speech, the 5-minute speech, or the 30-minute speech. And so I'm going to give you maybe the 2-minute speech and see how it goes. And I'd be happy to fill in any of the gaps at any point. I work with a group, and my card's coming around, and I'd love to get your cards as well. I work for the group, the strategic organization we contract with, as indirectly, the Army One Source. Army One Source is an initiative through the Pentagon, and they're concerned with trying to get legal services to the returning service members. That's their main goal. They're not going to turn away veterans by any means. So if anybody shows up on the doorstep, they'll help them as well. And it's not necessarily Army; it's all the services. They're not going to necessarily emphasize that, but so all their materials are going to look like Army. Uh-oh. Can somebody push that button? I guess the key button is.
I didn't do it.
Yeah,
I'm very good at this, apparently.
Mr.
I have some experience now, so. I'm sorry, we're going for input here. Is that the idea, or?
I think if
No input is detected. There's component, S video, no. No. We're not connected somehow. And it is plugged into the back of your side of your machine there.
Sign in on somebody's.
The what?
The furthest over.
The standby on?
That's what I'm here
They get that shown.
No. Yeah, no, there's an input button. It's not actually detecting anything, but. Huh.
I like the way this is designed to your laptop and your tie.
Oh.
Complete package.
It's not going to do it. All right. It is plugged in. All right. Probably HDMI or RGB. That's the correct cord, I guess.
I would help Ken, but I'm one of those guys that when the car breaks down and your wife's sitting with you, you pop the hood and you walk around in front of the hood and you think, okay, now I'm really going to impress her. And what you're looking for are the two wires laying apart, that all you have to do is plug them together.
That's right.
And it very rarely ever happens.
Huh. There may have been 2 cords.
It's just the one cord. Yeah, I tracked that down.
Let me try to get my key.
Would you please? That'd be great.
Well,
so the 5-minute or the 9-minute?
That'll be the 20-second. Well, what we're doing is trying to push out military legal assistance to the field. And so, as we know, the surge is coming back. The returning service members will be coming back. We've got some data as to where they're deployed from, how many counties, and so we've got all those maps. Some of it you have to drill down a little bit because, you know, it might be their residence is this county, but they're deployed out of another state, which has, in some instances, causes a problem because maybe when they live in Dodge City, Kansas, their units out of Oklahoma, they come back, they start looking for benefits, and Oklahoma says, well, you live in Kansas, and then go talk to them, and then they go talk to Kansas, and they say, your unit's out of Oklahoma, so sorry, and so they get caught in this weird loop, and so there's all of those odd things that they have to deal with. But we're kind of working hand in hand with what the ADA is doing already. If anything, our emphasis will probably be more along the lines of trying to help folks, the service members are coming back and going to their hometowns. Some of the active military, they can go to the base, they might be able to talk to a JAG if they have time about limited topics and this type of thing. But when you got the guy that's going back home to Dodge City and going back to his work, and he runs into problems and finds out he's got legal problems he wasn't even aware of, he doesn't want to jump in the car and drive 4 hours to the base. It's just not an option. You'd have to take time off. So we need to get the lawyer that's his neighbor, who lives down the street, engaged in this process so that person returning back into their hometown can go someplace and have real, meaningful legal counsel. So that's what we're trying to do. We started with a project, we were given about 2 months notice to gear up, and so we hurried and threw some leads together, and we were able to contact 2 states. We went to work with Virginia and Kansas last fall. And we've got some numbers for that. We did a campaign where we had emails that you won't be able to see, it was through the state bars, and so they would send it out to the membership, and these folks would get these emails, and it was an appeal to them to try to step forward and take on these cases. And just in that little 6-week window, we got 56 out of Kansas and 90 some out of Virginia, just in that short period, which, you know, sometimes you have email inbox fatigue, and so we're fighting that as well. So we thought that was a decent response. Arizona was very supportive, but they just didn't have enough time for their state bar governance process to kick in and give all the okays, so that but they were involved too. I wish that they could have been the third. This spring, we're going to move to 10 more states, and I can't tell you who they are. The Pentagon works in interesting ways, and I'm sure there's going to be some thoughts as to where they get the biggest bang for the buck politically and whatever. But they are trying for geographic and demographic diversity throughout the country. There's some things that I have here.
I'd ask that you send it to Paul and he send it out to the group.
That'd be good. Yeah. The slide deck?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd love to show it to you, but I don't know what happened. One piece I would say, no matter what 10 states are chosen, and it's going to be soon, all 50 state bar associations can tap into some of these resources, one of which is we've had Professor Kenny Hageland out of Arizona put together a 35-minute video that will be offered free of charge. And so the only stipulation to these state bars is that they can use some of these resources that we've put together. but they have to offer them out for free. They can't profit from it. So we've got that program. We've got another program that's just basically talking about the military culture and just how to do that. And the third was intended to be a CLE accredited, but the state bars are going to have to pursue that themselves. That's another expense that we just simply can't foot. And that would be for family law. And I know family law is a state matter, but there are some commonalities across states. There's the federal law as far as which jurisdictions apply that would kick in, SCRA and some uniform laws. So we walk through that. So that would be that was intended to be accredited through CLEs. The last thing I'd like to emphasize, this is kind of a broad brush approach, and so we've got legal problems, and I'm coordinating the legal side of it. Another prong of this effort is the behavioral health side, and we've got social workers and psychologists, psychiatrists, etc., that have all kicked in and provided material as subject matter experts, and we're looking at financial and faith. And so all of those prongs together, I think, is a real strength because there's going to be a little bit of cross-pollination, and I'm really looking forward to that. So that's the next stage, is the 10 states. We're going to keep moving forward, and I'm out of time, and that's that. So,
technical support here. Yeah. Steve, while we're waiting this, Steve, did you have something you want to mention?
I wanted to piggyback off of Brock's presentation.
Oh, whatever.
So now, Ken, you put to shame.
Right here.
Oh, whatever.
So I can click through just very quickly through this. So this is the logos is the Army One Source, and then the command up in the other corner. It's a very modest budget, and unfortunately, it's all wrapped up in the current sequestration talks. So I'm hopeful. Here's the overview. I touched most of that. 3 of the top 10 unmet needs of the military are legal problems, which I thought was kind of interesting. Here's the overview. We need to increase the number of lawyers, educate professionals in the field, and support efforts statewide. We put together a turnkey electronic campaign that any state bar can use. It's pretty much all ready to go. We've got press releases, we've got everything. They roll this out. It's heavily supported with Facebook, LinkedIn, tweets, etc., all the social media to try to encourage pro bono attorneys to step forward. We've got sign-up reports, by the way. Joan, I've got yours. I'll just hand it to the Texas people when we're ready to go. Joan somehow saw this, I'm not sure where, but signed up, and we thank you for that, and we'll just get it to the right folks. So Kansas and Virginia, oops, sorry. Kansas and Virginia, and they had nice things to say about the program so far. This is a sample. This is a sample. Oh, there it is. That's a sample email that went out, and so you see, Army. When you deal with the Army, they like to tell you about the color schemes, the fonts, and everything. So we had to do it exactly how they wanted to do it, and it's all uniform. And so you can see the first line, the yellow is lived in combat conditions for 12 months, and the contrast is when they came back home in the white. So they face the eviction at home, and then there's some more text. And so if you're an attorney, you'd open up your inbox and take a look, and you'd say, oh, maybe I think about that. Our tagline down at the bottom is support, counsel, advocate. And then if they click on further information, then it would go to the website splash page, and it would be this. And we've tried to give those pictures that you see are actual deployed Kansas Guards members, and we tried to go with gender diversity and racial diversity, and so there's each time you get one, there's going to be a different face you're going to see up there in the, throughout the 6-week campaign. It's a splash page. Here's the pieces I was telling you about that we're having state bars offer for free. There's 3 different programs. The middle one is the one that we really hope gets picked up for accreditation for CLE. That's it. So sorry about that if I was rushed.
Those were sharp.
Steve.
Sorry for the delay. So, as I indicated earlier, California has a penal code section 1170.9, which builds off of Minnesota's effort to facilitate treatment instead of incarceration. January 1 of this year, subsection H went into effect. I feel I've got to read it just so it sounds legal, but I won't read the whole thing. Basically, for a person to be eligible for restorative provisions, they must be on probation in substantial compliance of their treatment program, successfully complete the court-ordered treatment program, represent that they do not represent a danger to the health or safety of others, and demonstrated significant benefit from the education rehabilitation program. And for the court to make such a determination for restorative relief, it must review 5 things: that the defendant completed the program, that there was progress in formal education, they developed a career potential, they have some leadership and personal responsibility efforts, and they've contributed to the community. So in short, our Veterans Court has had 8, I think close to 8, 9 graduates in the 2 years that we've been in existence. And January 4th, 3 days after this law took effect, 2 participants received total relief, which meant their original criminal offense was dismissed and the records were sealed. These offenses were domestic violence offenses, which in truth were suicide attempts underlying it. There were guns that, firearms that were unloaded, and they were markedly different individuals, both who came in with support from their exes, wanting relief. The court held a detailed review hearing, made findings, was savvy enough to put those findings separate from the order of relief so that each participant could put out the order of relief and shield themselves from the findings and the really serious offenses that were committed. But most critical was they are markedly different people from the individuals who first entered a plea, would otherwise have been sentenced to custody, if not state prison, and would have been lost to our communities. The dark side that I alluded to earlier is because of the 3 most recent headline cases that Brock referenced earlier, even though not all of them had played out at the time, the prosecution in San Diego County recently came up with an offer that a particular veteran enter a plea to 2 charges, but stipulate that they could not seek relief under this code section. Their concern is that or any future veteran might then have access to weapons. And so the fear of weapons is overshadowing the fear that we might otherwise have that treatment could actually deal with these issues, and we might have markedly different veterans. So that's the backlash. And that's part of, I didn't want to be the downer of the meeting. Sorry, gang. It was enough that I turned off the machine. But I did want to raise the issue in part to just kind of highlight there is this countervailing force, and also solicit ideas, suggestions, or chapters from Brock's book, because I can't wait until April.
Oh, you ruined it now.
To help respond to this backlash, because we're firmly, I mean, it's already been discussed here, the recidivism rate is so low compared to what the courts, the prosecution, the community are used to with the 70-75+%. And the individuals who are otherwise in the headlines for all the wrong reasons are the ones that haven't been getting treatment. And yeah, it's just kind of a sad turn of events. then we fall back to what we already know, even though we know it's not proven. And then, in fact, it's contrary to our established practice.
Something Steve said reminded me of something that's really critical. As you're promoting the veteran treatment court model, apparently there's been some kind of backlash saying, why should veterans get special treatment? If they understand, people usually raise that are the arch-liberal like ACLU types, who I work very closely with, and if they understand that, well, do you believe it's just to imprison special needs populations who have mental trauma, mental instability, addiction, or trauma, being in foster care, in jail because they act out on the basis of those problems. They understand that this is basically a way to treat those problems and correct an injustice. And veterans are afflicted in the same way. They have the invisible trauma of PTSD and traumatic brain injury. We're at very close to the end. Before I do, I'd be very remiss if I didn't highlight the wonderful work of my director, Amy Horton-Newell, who put everything together. And the invisible hand behind everything. Yes, Ken?
Just very quickly, there's a lot of things we're working on federally. You're welcome to contact me. Give me your card. I'll give you my card if you'd like. One area we don't have policy that we will be looking at, we'll have a conference call coming up not long after here, is the ability of the VA to contact represented veterans directly. There has been a policy in place. It has recently been changed. There were reasons why attorneys were getting in the way of the VA communicating with the veteran. The VA has a statutory mandate to assist, and so there was a change in the policy to allow the VA to contact veterans directly. Unfortunately, in some cases, that's resulting in seeking the veterans' concession on certain legal issues of legal significance. That's not the intent. We'll be working at a solution if you want to be involved. Same thing. Give me your card.
And please, all of you, leave your cards with either me or with Amy so we can maintain contact. I'm going to email you the 60-minute segment on veterans courts, which you haven't seen, is very powerful. They juxtapose a veteran who was basically in a bear hug with President Bush, and then 2 years later he's out of the service, he's in jail. It's incredibly powerful to show what's at stake in this effort. Terry started our program by pointing out that one of the great things of the work we're doing is we're changing public perception of our profession. I'll never forget a study that was done where they asked the public, to rank, how you feel about various professions. We were right below used car salesmen in terms of public popularity. And what you all are doing is really helping to change that. I'll share one last story that I'll never forget. One of the most inspiring things was being in Covenant House, a shelter for homeless runaway youth, with a young lady named Nefisha. She'd been in foster care. She was there because she was homeless. And in the course of discussing her legal issue, I said, what have you thought about what you'd like to do when you get older? She said, actually, I want to go into law. And I go, really? What attracts you to law? She says, well, I feel like I've been given a lot in my life, and I feel I need to give back. So she really got what we're all about. Keep the fire burning, and thank you all again for your work.
Thank you.